For a tiny island nation situated in the South Atlantic, the British Overseas Territory of the Falkland Islands has one of the strongest economies in the world relative to its size. Boasting one of the highest gross national incomes per capita, the islands rival nations such as Luxembourg and the Republic of Ireland. But it's the location of this island nation that might have more to say about the reasons for its success. A reliance on the ocean for fishing and an expanding multi-million-pound tourism industry has paved the way to an economic stronghold. But how much more will the islands need to diversify in order to maintain their coveted prosperity? In the last episode, we learned how the Falklands transformed its economy with the establishment of new industries. But while these sectors have improved the island's economic position, there have been challenges. In more recent years, impacts such as Brexit, limitations on labour and technological constraints have all had their part to play. In this episode, we'll highlight other obstacles to economic development, including the implications of climate change, COVID-19, and the island's distinctive geographical positioning. Geographical isolation comes with a plethora of unique challenges. Products and services that most of the world might take for granted can be difficult to develop and maintain in remote locations such as the Falklands. Factor in other geopolitical issues and economic development presents a considerable undertaking.
Looking at different societies that have got kind of small islands communities, it's quite difficult actually to find one that's exactly in the same position as the Falklands. We've got certain geopolitical threats which have isolated our shipping links, but also the connectivity issue here continues to be something that restricts how we can develop as a country.
One of the key requirements for kind of really growing land-based tourism is more transit links and kind of getting a second flight on, which obviously we have challenges that other countries might not. Same with improving our internet access obviously opens the door for lots more types of businesses, but that in itself is with challenges due to our kind of remote location and kind of lack of physical connectivity. So we are in a very unique situation because of kind of where we sit in the world and where we sit geopolitically.
But in the year 2020, the Falklands' geographical challenges were highlighted even further.
The King Edward Memorial Hospital is currently monitoring the World Health Organization's advice around the novel coronavirus outbreak in China. Member of the Legislative Assembly, Leona
An
Roberts,
inpatient in the hospital who is in isolation has tested positive for the COVID-19 virus.
There have been 13 positive COVID-19 results in the Falklands, but all those affected...
Stay at home, don't go out into public places and spread it around.
In 2019, the discovery of an infectious coronavirus sparked fear across the world. As a global pandemic began to ensue, nations from around the world did what they could to limit the spread of the disease. Countries witnessed the enforcement of national lockdowns and the observance of new measures to help protect its citizens from infection. Almost overnight, a large proportion of the world's industries was forced to either close down or become dramatically reduced as many people began adapting to life working from home. The economic impacts of the slowdown were also felt across the Falklands, with industries such as tourism being forced to immediately scale back. In 2019, for example, the island saw some of the highest numbers of tourists visiting the country at 1,943 visits for leisure. But with the onset of COVID-19, that number reduced to just 2 visits in the year 2021.
Well, initially when COVID really set in March 2020, of course we were coming to the end of our tourism season, so it didn't have a huge impact straight away, but of course it was soon became reality. It was going to be much longer term, and of course we went back from the best season ever to 0 visitors.
Generally speaking, from what I understand from being here, we were lucky with most of our economy. It carried on going, but of course there were sectors like tourism, like the hotel sector, the hospitality sector, that certainly was impacted because tourism stopped in its tracks for 2 years, for example. So they were greatly impacted.
Businesses were finding it difficult to survive, there was nobody for retail, the accommodation didn't have the bookings, and just generally, even people with tourism as a second income were hit by it.
I really thought that was the end of our business. But we thought, let's be careful, and we know it's hit us, and we've locked down. I will admit, for 2 months, I think it was 2 months, the government did help.
In response to the disruption inflicted on the economy, Falkland Islands government created support schemes to help bolster economic activity whilst aiding local businesses.
The government did bring in quite a few schemes to make sure that if companies couldn't keep people on, at least they were being paid to stay at work.
Falkland Islands government obviously introduced the trip scheme, which gave everybody resident in the Falklands a voucher to spend on accommodation, eating out or retail. So that helped to keep some of them afloat.
They were offering to like 2 months it did help, which was very good. But, you don't want help all the time because eventually that you've got to pay it back, and you don't want your business, especially after all the years we've had the business, and it was just, it's picked up so good. We didn't want to run that out and have debt.
We were still worried, even as tourism started, whether after those 2 years enough people would return in the way of drivers and such like to make it work. But I'm happy to say that as this season has unfolded, maybe the numbers had been slightly down on the BC before COVID days. We're coping, and coping well, I would say.
I think we should be really positive about it. 2019-20 saw the biggest numbers for cruise vessel passengers and for land-based visitors. And whilst numbers are slightly down at the moment for the first month of our season, this might, sort itself out before the end of the season, and we might be near similar numbers to 2019-20. But, there needs to be more consumer confidence in long-haul travel, which is probably one of the biggest barriers at the moment.
Whilst rebuilding consumer confidence remains a priority for the tourism sector, the importance of diversifying the country's economy has also been noted.
We always are on the lookout for various different industries here in the Falklands, whatever they may be. But at the moment we're sort of stuck with what we got, and I don't mean to say that to sound demeaning, because they are very, very important industries to the Falklands. But the more diversification we can find from somewhere, the better. And of course, we're always looking for that.
While the global pandemic had a negative impact on the island's sectors and overall economy, what it served to highlight are the issues associated with the country's geographical isolation and need for further economic diversification. But that's not all the pandemic highlighted. With a large proportion of the economy rooted in the extraction and use of natural resources, many have also started to ponder the country's vulnerability to other external shocks, including climate change. So the question that now remains is not only how to progress the economy, but how to do so sustainably. The fisheries of the Falklands form a vital part of the economy. Since 1989, Falkland Islands government has sold over 7,500 fishing licenses to fleets from around the world. Over these years, this has generated around £695 million in overall annual revenue. In 2018 alone, the fishing and aquaculture industry represented 63.6% of the country's GDP. With this money, the government has been able to invest in crucial public services such as health and education, as well as the development of large infrastructural projects, including roads and telecommunications. But with such a dependence on the resource-based industry, the islands have to be prepared for future challenges. Marine ecologist Dr. Jessie van der Grient works for the South Atlantic Environmental Research Institute and is currently investigating the potential impacts of climate change on certain fish stocks. The data that she finds will help to inform government decisions on the management of the fisheries for the future.
Most of the fisheries catches here in the Falkland Islands is made up of squid catches, and we know that squids are notoriously sensitive to environmental change. Temperature can affect a lot of things in organisms in the marine environment, so it can affect where they occur, their movement patterns, their respiration rate, as well as, for example, their reproductive rates and stuff like that. So right now, through a partnership with Fortuna, we have set up experimental tanks up at Moody Brook, and we're measuring responses to temperature.
So in terms of warming, we might see different things. So in the nearshore habitat, we have our lovely kelp forests. Kelp can potentially change and respond to warming, so they might not form the forest as thick anymore, the extent might not be as large. But the kelp forests are a really important nursery ground for loads of animals in the Falkland Islands, like the rock cod, like the squid eggs. So that could mean that there isn't a habitat for them to lay their eggs.
Probably the first effects that we'll see is like when the shallower waters warm up, they will warm up first. That could potentially influence egg development. So often what we'll see is that squid eggs develop quicker in warmer waters, but that often also leads to smaller individuals that hatch. That could be like one of the impacts of environmental change around the Falkland Islands. One that we might see a reduced biomass or smaller individuals or just a reduced population because those eggs either don't hatch anymore or because they just can't make that migration in their lifestyle.
Understanding the effects of climate change and how to mitigate them is an ongoing task, but it's an area that the government must continue to prioritise in order to protect the country's industries and goals for sustainable economic growth.
Without a realistic look at climate change, the water table, understanding what we can do for our country now, we're only going to pay for it later. And with the approval of ITQB, a very clear recognition that natural resources form a huge part of our future, and making sure we can do it as sustainably as possible will help make sure that these resources can renew as much as possible on the way, because what we don't want to do is, mismanage our fishery stock and wipe out that for the future anyway. So we need to be making sure that we're taking a responsible approach to all of it.
So one of the things I'd like to think about in the next strategy is one of the roles for government in developing the economy is in removing barriers. So things that kind of private sector entities run up against that they don't have the ability to overcome on their own. And so identifying those barriers and using government resources to do that rather than kind of trying to undertake kind of commercial activity ourselves, and that's where the roles and responsibilities I think really fit. But I think that's going to be a key place is where are the barriers and what can we do to remove them? I think in terms of sustainability, in last year's budget, we had funding approved for environmental projects and sustainability projects. And so starting next in 23-24. And so thinking through how that money can be used to generate innovation, generate kind of more sustainable green business practices will be really important. So that's something we've got kind of on our radars now that hopefully kind of 6 to 9 months from now will be active.
It's clear to see that balancing economic needs with the environment has now become a priority, and despite the challenges ahead, there still remains ample opportunity for the Falklands to reach its goals of a sustainable future. Join us next month in the final episode where we examine potential solutions for an improved economic vision, as well as viewing the contributions that are already being made towards increasing the island's sustainability.